The old gray lady on the lake still stands tall and proud over there. Today, a lot of the modern athletes call her big and ugly. But back in the 40s and the 50s, the players sang a different tune.
I think it's great, but I still think that Cleveland Stadium is a great place to play. It brings back the old blood and guts there. There's something about football. Once you play with a football player, it's like being in battle and combat in a war. You're a lifetime friend forever, and that's because you're down there, grit, dirt, ice.
Dante Glue Fingers Lavelli began his 11-year pro career in the Browns' inaugural campaign, 1946. Today, he still lives and works in this area, and he still fondly remembers his days at the stadium. Dante, what was your first impression of coming here to the stadium in Cleveland?
Well, Joe, my first impression was I was just a little kid, and Cleveland got the All-Star game, and Mel Harder was a pitcher. That was back in 1932. I wasn't fortunate enough to get a ticket, though.
Dottie, what do you say you and I run one of those famous down-and-out patterns over to a 50-yard line seat?
Okay, Joe.
A little razzle-dazzle results in a touchdown. Graham finds Lavelli in the clear and passes. Dottie makes the catch, and with two foes bearing down, laterals out to Edgar Jones, then throws a nice block and special delivery, goes in for the touchdown.
Any special memories of that first football game, the Browns against the Miami Seahawks?
The only thing I remember, Joe, is I was playing behind John Yoniker, and Otto threw a pass to John Yoniker, and he dropped the ball in front of the bench, and Paul Brown sent me in, and I played end ever since, and Yoniker went to defense.
Speaking of Otto Graham, how did he rank among the quarterbacks during his time in the 40s and 50s?
Joe, I don't know all the statistics they have now. Passer this, passer that, this. All I know is between Otto and I and the rest of the Cleveland Browns, we won 10 championship games, and I considered him to be the best passer that I've ever seen, primarily because he had great touch in his fingers.
The first NFL championship game, 1950. Did the Browns have any special preparations for that one?
Well, Joe, everybody kept telling us every city we were in, we were second team, this and that. We were waiting at training camp at Bowling Green for 4 years for this game to come about, and I can always remember Paul Brown saying that he'd never seen 33 or 35 men more prepared to go into battle than for this game.
Those two championships in 1954 and 55, were they a little extra special because of the 3 previous championship defeats?
Yes, I can't remember which year it was. One year we didn't have a real good record, 10-4 or something, or 9-5, but we dedicated ourselves to win the championship. We always entered the season, then in spring training camp, either Bowling Green or Hiram, that we figured we could win the championship. And I think once you instill that attitude into your players, you can get it over all of the players. You have to get 33, 35 men thinking that way.
1 year after you retired, the Browns acquired another dominant player, Jim Brown. Now, what were your impressions of Jim Brown during his rookie campaign?
I'd like to play as Jim Brown, but as things came, I never decided to play another year. But he was probably the best running back that I've ever seen, and I'm glad that Jim Brown finally got to play on a championship team.
Although Walter Payton broke his career rushing mark by virtue of playing more years, Jimmy Brown still ranks as the NFL's greatest runner in the minds of many. Looking back on it now, the 1964 season was quite a season for the Cleveland Browns. They won the Eastern Division title with a 52-20 blowout of the New York Giants, and then took the title game from the Baltimore Colts 27-0. gutsy Bill Nelson at quarterback, the Browns returned to glory in the late 60s. With quarterback Mike Phipps at the helm, the Browns stumbled in the 70s until a dark-haired young man from San Diego State stepped forward and became known as the original Cardiac Kid. On a bitterly cold day in January 1981, 77,655 hearty souls let out a collective groan. Oakland 14, Cleveland 12. By 1986, the Browns had a new look.
There's the green, men. There's the green.
A new coach, a new cleaned-up old gray lady, and a new quarterback, as Bernie Kosar led them to a division championship. John Elway and the Denver Broncos rode into the stadium for the AFC title game. And the Browns' dream season ended with what's become known as the Drive.
Touchdown!
The big center field scoreboard is about the only thing that's changed as much as the stadium fences through the years. Although it may not look it on the inside today, the scoreboard is totally high-tech.
Well, basically every night before we start an event, we have a program in a computer that runs a scan across the board, both the horizontal and vertical, and it'll lock onto a bulb that's burnt out or a triax that's burnt out. It'll locate it for us. It prints out a list, and then the repairman comes back here about an hour before the game or before the gates open around 5 o'clock and replaces any bulbs or triaxes that are out.
No, there is not a little man out on the scoreboard putting up all the numbers you see when you come to the stadium. They are actually produced electronically and by computer here in the computer center at the press level at the stadium. Even the out-of-town scores are beamed in from the New York City area.
The press box has undergone some changes through the years, and it's seen some great broadcasters come and go along the way.
Now we're in an area in which I spent the better part of 17 seasons, broadcast row, radio and TV. Dick Bosman's no-hitter, Dennis Eckersley's no-no, the perfect game of Lenny Barker on TV. There really haven't been that many changes up here in broadcast row, but there have been a lot of changes in the stadium itself, and the man responsible for many of them sits right out there in that loge.
Well, the first time I saw the stadium was December 1960, when I started negotiations to buy the Browns. I stayed over to see the Chicago Bears come in to play the Browns on a Sunday, I believe it was December 11th, 1960, and I froze. It was cold. That was my first impression. But I was overwhelmed with the size and the majesty of the stadium then, and I still am today. I think it's a beautiful stadium with a great history to it.
No place like home. No place like home. Glad to be here.
Oh, you're wonderful. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Probably the most dramatic moment of my entire career in Cleveland would be when, unannounced, we introduced Ernie Davis at the doubleheader in 1962, August. And everybody in town knew that rumors were around that he was dying, which he was. And that was probably the last time they saw him. He walked out. We had the announcer say, and another man on the offensive unit, Ernie Davis, and he walked out in civilian clothes through the goalpost with a spotlight on him. That was probably the most dramatic moment I've ever experienced, including championship years. It was very, very emotional. I think if I had to single out a series of impressions of the stadium, at the stadium, would have to be Jim Brown's superb performance continually, without a let-up, week in and week out. It was just overwhelming in his majesty, in his beauty, in his fluid motion, and his strength and his speed. We'll never see one like him again. The furthest point of the playing field is the 50-yard line, is a 50-yard line seat, because it's oval-shaped, which runs contrary to what it should be. But it's got great vantage points. The corners are the best seats in the house. People don't realize that, because it's closest to the playing field. And when we broke through the visiting team dressing room shower wall to expand it, we found a water corrosion over a 55-year period had just eaten away at the steel to the point where we were just mortified by it. So we repaired every structural beam, every expansion joint, things that people don't see. They can insist all day long. They know where I'm coming from. It would be folly to spend 2 cents on that expandability project, let alone $14 or $15 million, which probably it would cost. We're not moving up there, period. And I wish the Indians well. They want their own stadium. They should have it. What's the purpose of making it a dual purpose? We hear that now.
Memories echo through the old Gray Ladies' concrete and steel framework. And chances are those old echoes and some new ones will linger for years to come.